We all know people, especially Christians, who say they've experienced miracles, or that they know people who have experienced major miracles. And if you're an atheist like me, your reaction is probably, I don't really think what happened is a miracle. I don't think God just swooped down and intervened in your life. There's probably a natural explanation at play. Whenever people say they've experienced these miracles, as tempting as it is to kind of debunk whatever they're saying right then and there, it's probably not the most polite thing to do, especially when you're around friends. But since none of those people are probably watching this video, let's talk about why some of their miracles may not actually be miraculous. Our memories are very selective, and things that may not seem like a big deal at one point, we can make them into these life-changing events well into the future. And here's what I mean by that. And here's a true story. When I was in college, there was this girl I really liked in my dorm, and I was a little too scared to do anything about it. And one day, we just kind of ran into each other at a bus stop near where we lived. And we started talking, and we hit it off, and we basically ended up dating for 2 years. And that was pretty incredible. And what was amazing is that, I had gone to medical school at the time, and I had decided to quit. And she was part of the reason that I decided to step away from med school so I could spend some more time with her. And it was during that time away from medical school that I started blogging and writing about atheism, and I had a chance to write a book about my beliefs. All these amazing things happened, and I could probably trace back that whole chain of events to meeting this girl outside the bus stop. If I were a religious person, I could so easily say God guided us to come together at that point. I could so easily say that was a miracle. What are the odds that, we came together at that point and all this stuff happened because of that? Well, the truth is, if that hadn't happened, and let's say we didn't end up hitting it off, well, something else would have happened. My life would be totally different right now, and it's not like I would have this experience to compare it to, so I don't think that's a fair comparison. A lot of times, we can all point out, I'm sure, turning points in our lives where, if something happens slightly differently, your entire life would have gone in a different direction. And just because it happened that way doesn't mean that that turning point was a miracle. We just attribute this amazing sense to that moment, and we think it's this big deal, and there must have been a reason it happened that way. But if it didn't happen that way, something else would have happened. So it's not really as big of a deal as we make it out to be. And a lot of people think that's a miracle. It's not a miracle. It's just one of many branches along the road of your life. Other people's miracles can often sound pretty delusional. When you experience the miracle, it's like, oh, this is amazing. God wants it to be this way. Sometimes when other people say they've experienced a miracle, you're like, oh, sure, that's crazy. If you're religious, when you feel like God has spoken to you and told you to make a decision, you thank God. You think this is an amazing thing that has happened. And when someone says, God spoke to me and told me to quit my job and start a brand new career, you think badly of them. You're like, I don't think that's what God wants you to do. And then you go home and talk trash about them with your spouse. And again, when people tell you, God cured their disease, you kind of want to see their medical records to confirm that. But, I've heard so many Christians say, my cancer went into remission, and they just think it's a miracle and that's the end of the story. So again, when it happens to us, and if you have that notion of believing that this could be a miracle, it's so easy to believe this is something supernatural. Sometimes when it happens to other people, though, even if you believe in miracles, you become skeptical. You start wondering whether that really was God or whether there's a better explanation. It's much harder to believe in miracles when they happen to somebody else than when they happen to you. It's interesting to me that Christians always seem to experience all the miracles. When we're talking about faith healing services like Benny Hinn or Peter Popoff, those are all Christians. When we talk about successful pastors, Joel Osteen, people like that, they get their own TV shows. They get their own successful reality shows, too, even if you're a mediocre pastor. Even if Christians write best-selling books, it's not just those books. They get their entire sections at bookstores. And everything that Snopes ever debunks, those are things your pastors told you about in church as miracles. So basically, all of these things you hear about as miracles are things that somehow happen in conjunction with the Christian God. You never hear, a Hindu or a Muslim say, let me tell you what God told me the other day. You never hear them talk about the miracles that happened to them. This is almost almost entirely a Christian phenomenon, at least in America. And by the way, all of those other religious groups, they believe in God, they believe in divine power, but they don't market miracles like Christians do. And the problem with miracles is that when Christians kind of repeat it to each other, they all think it happens to them. It's this perpetuating cycle. Oh, it happened to this person at church? It might happen to other people at church. And then people start thinking everything good that happens to them is some form of a miracle. It's such an overused word, but it's partly that way because it gets a life of its own in these Christian circles. Miracles have never been proven. If you can prove that a miracle or something supernatural happened, believe me, James Randi is waiting with $1 million check to give to you if you could prove it. But no one's ever claimed that money. Even the Catholic Church's supposed miracles to turn, former popes into saints, those aren't proven miracles. Those are medical issues that maybe we can't explain yet, but the natural explanations are probably waiting right there to be figured out. So miracles don't actually happen, and a lot of times when you get enough information about them, they're debunked pretty quickly. If miracles were real, can you imagine how many of our problems would be solved? I mean, diseases would be eradicated, all of our loved ones would never die. I mean, it would be pretty incredible if miracles happened on a clear, consistent basis. But they don't, because it's totally selective what you call a miracle and what you don't. And unfortunately, they just kind of happen in our own minds. We just assign the word miracle to things that we just can't believe happened. It turns out miracles are rare, selective, subjective, and unverifiable. So pretty much all of what I just told you, I actually got from a pastor who was actually questioning the miracles that another pastor told him about. And he was the one who said, let me try to explain away this other pastor's miracles. And one of the reasons he gave for why he didn't think miracles were necessarily real was because they didn't happen to him. And he said, that might be because I'm a bad Christian. And I'm reading this and I feel bad for the guy. It's like, no, you're so close. You're like 90% of the way there for explaining why miracles don't happen to anybody. You're so close to nailing it. And then he backed up because he's like, I'm still a Christian. I still think miracles could happen. But if I were to try to explain them away, these are some of the reasons I would give for why miracles don't actually happen. He's so close. I just wish he would take that final step and just admit, nope, it's a man-made idea. I wish I could just say to this pastor, no, you're not experiencing miracles because no one experiences miracles. They're a man-made idea. Just kind of get over it. I know that's not an easy thing to say, but all these things that happen to these other Christians that they're not really miracles. They're just a way of making sense of them in your head because you just can't believe something that amazing would happen to you. Well, guess what? Amazing things happen to everybody, and really horrible things happen to everybody. And it doesn't mean God likes you or doesn't like you or wants to bestow a miracle upon you. So maybe eventually this pastor will just take that final step, that last step, that toughest step, and just admit miracles aren't real. But for now, He has all the reasons in his head for understanding why those miracles aren't really happening. Yeah, he's so close to getting there, but it's really hard to give up that belief when deep down in your heart, you still believe in magic. My name is Hemant Mehta, and I write at friendlyatheist.com. Please leave your comments below, and we will check them out.